All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of Lifting, Running, and Living with your all-time favorite coaches, Kelly.
Hello.
Hey, and JK, that is me. We are back and better than ever with episode number 47. So let's kick
Better
things
than
off.
ever.
Yeah. All right. Let's kick it off with updates.
Okay.
So Kelly, what's going on with you?
Okay, well, I've had a very busy 2 weeks since we last spoke. It's maybe the most social I've ever been in my life. I've seen almost every friend I have in the world.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so I was telling Ty, this tends to happen. I go through phases, I don't know if you're like this too, where I haven't seen people in a while. So then I'm like, I want to be social. So I reach out to a bunch of people. And then we all happen to make plans around the same time. And then the week comes, I'm just like, wow, I have something to do every single day this week, which is
that
tiring for an introvert.
That doesn't happen. Doesn't happen to me. But however, I can see a scenario where that would happen to an individual. Yes, I can see that movie.
Yeah. So everything lined up this past week, but it was a lot of fun things. I tried some new things for the first time, which was exciting. So I went cross-country skiing for the first time ever.
Okay. How was that?
It was hard. It was fun. It does not feel natural to me, so I don't know. I feel like they advertise it as it's just like walking on skis, and it just does not feel like that to me. It's very odd. But I do want to try skate skiing. So we did the classic cross-country skiing. I don't know if you're familiar. Classic is when you're on the skis that you like keep your feet parallel. You just kind of like glide forward.
Okay.
1 foot at a time. And skate ski is more like rollerblading. So you like push off 1 foot to the side on the ski.
Okay. But they use the same skis, same equipment.
The skate skis are slightly different. They like have an edge, I think.
Okay.
Cross-country skis don't have an edge.
So
They're super light.
my only experience with cross-country skiing, which I don't think this was really a normal thing in most places, is that cross-country skiing was actually a unit, I guess you would call it, in my gym class when I was in high school.
Oh.
In upstate New York. So I went to high school
cool.
in Rochester, New York, or right outside of Rochester in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And I specifically remember cross-country skiing. Actually, let me rewind. It was in junior high / middle school.
Okay.
Not high school. It was in middle school because we had these big hills, which I think even the soccer field, one of the soccer fields might have been at the top of the hill. But yeah, cross-country skiing was actually a unit in our gym class. So that's the only experience that I've ever had with it. And it was, skiing was like a massive thing at my high school. There was like a really big, there were a couple of big, I think, like ski resorts or whatever they're called, ski mounts, whatever. But yeah, so I don't think at that time we got into the whole skate skiing, you said, versus straight
Classic.
skiing. What's the other one called? Classic.
Huh.
I don't
That's
know.
what I've been told. I'm no expert. I went for the first time ever.
Hey, whatever works for you. But hey,
Yeah.
let's get active. All right.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was really warm, which was kind of weird because I like wore a tank top that warm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Dang. Okay.
Yeah, it was like 50 degrees and we were at like 9,000 feet. So
Wow. That's legit.
pretty toasty.
Okay.
Yeah, but I went with a couple of my friends and you have like the poles and you can either like kind of do a walking motion, so like 1 foot at a time, or you can like use your poles, more like use your arms and do like a double pull
Okay.
and just keep your feet together
Yeah.
or like parallel. And I gravitated towards that. And I turned to my friend at one point. I was like, this is why I strength train. So I can pull myself with my arms instead of
This is what we've
doing
trained
the other
for.
form.
It is kind of cool sometimes, I think, to see those skills transfer over or to see like where strength actually like comes through other than lifting weights, you know?
Yeah.
Or
So that
while
was
you're
really
lifting
cool.
weights. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And I also went bowling.
Okay.
Just exploring all the activities out there.
No, you're like an active. You're going to need about 3 months to recover now.
No,
from all
see,
this
okay, this kind
socializing.
of leads into my other update. I actually don't feel drained
Okay.
from the socializing or my training this past week. And this was week 2 of the 4-week lifting.
Yeah.
So it was like the 3-rep week. And I ran 26 miles, which has been the most since pre-5K.
For the week.
And yeah,
Okay. Okay.
and I feel pretty great, which I was watching a YouTube video today about a pro climber who took creatine for 2 months, and he was like comparing how he felt, and I was like, you know what? It's been about 5 or 6 weeks since I started, so maybe that is a contributing factor, along with like obviously I'm adapting
Yeah.
to what I'm doing, and it's been warmer, which I think just uplifts everything. So
Dang, that's pretty legit. Nice.
yeah, it was really cool. So I got one more week of the progression, then my deload, then I'm going to do my testing week. And then I'm
Okay.
going back to running more, I should say. I'm
Yeah.
going down to 2 days of lifting because I'm feeling the itch to run more.
Well,
So,
hey, chalk one up for having the freedom and flexibility and adaptability to be able to, similar to what we talked about with Ty, like just kind of do what feels good and switch
yeah,
through things and whatnot. I think that makes a lot of sense. I dig it.
yeah. So that's been fun. And then my other update, I'm going to keep this one quick because I know people have mixed feelings about hearing about stuff like this. But
Typically, whenever we say we're going to keep it quick, we end up not keeping it quick because then I
I'm
usually drag it out. So there you go. I didn't agree to
we'll
keep it
see.
quick.
Yeah, that's fair.
I did not agree.
I have been participating in some of the boycotts. So my main ones are not using Amazon and not using Target. Amazon because I'm really not a fan of billionaires right now. And like anything I can get on Amazon, I'd rather support something else. And then Target, I've been doing it since they rolled back their DEI initiatives in January. So I just want to mention that in case anyone is like, what can we possibly do? Because that feels like something we can all do, like direct our money where we actually want it to go and not give it to people we don't want to give it to. So that's been a way that I've been staying sane during this time in our country. And
Man,
just
oh
like,
man. Yeah.
yeah, just feeling like I'm making some sort of difference, or at least like for myself, feeling like I'm doing something and not just, sitting here hopeless.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I think about the boycotts, or when people boycott particular businesses or products or whatever the case may be, I think it's really easy at the beginning for folks other than that person, so folks from the outside, to comment or whatever the case may be, give unsolicited feedback that they feel like doing something like that is very performative, or that it's what is the term, virtue signaling, or whatever it might be. And I think about that actually fairly often, just because of the amount of people that I'm at least connected to who are very passionate about different topics in different areas,
Yeah.
on all sides on all sides of these things. Like, man, oh man, like if I could put everybody all in one room, I'm not sure if anybody would make it out alive, but
God.
whatever. I just think about sometimes, people are going to comment like, well, here's another, performative measure or whatever. And to that person, like to the person who's maybe receiving that feedback, because I've been the recipient of that sort of like commentary before for multiple different things. And just what comes to mind for me when you talk about something like that, I'm not saying that you've experienced that. I'm just kind of self-projecting. My thing is like, I totally hear where the person's coming from. And I think with anything that you are committed to doing initially, it will likely look like it's performative until you continue to do it over and over. You commit to whatever that thing is over and over, whether it's a boycott or speaking out against something, or moving your energy to fight for a particular cause or whatnot. Like, don't get it twisted. I've made a comment before or posted something before about how it's like when you try and do a transaction somewhere and your bank like won't let the transaction come through because they're like, this is totally out of your normal pattern. Like this almost seems like it's fraud.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's like the perfect parallel because it's like they make you go through like all these different levels of, are you sure this is you? Well, we're going to send you an email. Then we got to send you a 2-factor authentication. Then we're going to make you do like a multi-factor authentication. And then you've got to get on the phone and all this other stuff. And you're just like, are you serious? And I think about fighting for causes exactly the same way. So just, I don't know. Like I said, I didn't agree to just keep it short. So
yeah. Well, and one more thing I want to say is like, well, one, I'm not telling anyone else they should be boycotting. Like, it feels meaningful for me to do it. And along with that is I am in a position of privilege where I can boycott. Like, I don't have to go to Target or use Amazon. I can go elsewhere. I can spend a little more money to support local, that kind of thing. So, like, obviously that's not doable for everyone. So I don't want anyone feel bad if they still choose to. Like, we can't get around it. Amazon is super cheap, super fast, you know?
I still use it. So,
yeah. So
I get where you're
I don't
coming
want
from.
people to feel like I'm saying that they need to be or like feel bad if they are. But that's just what I'm personally trying to do since I am able.
Yeah, I think that we're just at, with the way that our economy, I guess for lack of a better way to put it, like the way that our economy is built or the way that our lifestyles are just kind of conditioned. I think that it's close to, I'm not going to say, yeah, it is definitely difficult to not have things like intermix. So it's like, and actually this will transition. I could transition into my update. So it's like, for example, we went to the Arnold would that be last weekend now?
That was last weekend,
Yeah, so we went to the Arnold last weekend, and for those who aren't familiar, like the Arnold, I think a lot of people at least have heard about it, but it's a massive Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4-day sports and fitness expo that happens in Columbus, Ohio. It's been going on for I don't know how many years now. One of the major like publicized draws is the bodybuilding and bikini competitions that happen because basically within the bodybuilding space, and whenever I say bodybuilding space, that is not just men, it's also women. Like it's in the bodybuilding space, the Arnold is considered the kickoff for the competition season, and then the Olympia that happens in Vegas is considered the close of the competition season, the pro competition season. Okay. Yeah. So basically it's like grand opening, grand closing. So the Arnold, which for those that really like get into bodybuilding, no matter what the division, however, bikini and then men's like classic, which is like classic physique is like Chris Bumstead, if anybody's familiar with his name. But those are kind of like the two big draws, or men's open bodybuilding is the big draw too. Those are like the massive dudes, like massive. They, whatchamacallit, what was I going to say? Shoot, I just lost my train of thought. Well, those are like the big draws. And what's really interesting is for those who are really into bodybuilding, it's always interesting because at the Arnold, basically, that sets the tone at the beginning of the season for what judges are looking for from each of those divisions. So, So, for example, whoever the winner of the Arnold this year for bikini, is a competitor named Vanya August, I believe was her name. And to my knowledge, she's the first Black female to win the Arnold, the pro division at the Arnold, I believe. I know that I think there's been one or two who've finished within the top 3, but she's the first that's won it all the way out as far as in bikini. Cool. And so however that first place finisher looks at the Arnold, that becomes like, everybody's like, okay, that's what judges are looking for. So they're looking at, okay, does she have more or less cap shoulders than I do, is she more or less conditioned, which is basically like abdominals showing through, like all this stuff. And so that basically sets the tone. And what's really interesting is then throughout the year, some of the judges will start to try and move the category. So they may want to try and soften the bikini look. So then when they're at those pro shows, they may pick a little bit differently because they feel like maybe bikini's getting like too muscular. It's a whole, there's so much that happens behind the scenes that, you know, I'm just fortunate to know people who coach in that world. So they'll tell me like, you know, my competitor looks the best that he or she has ever looked. And unfortunately, it's not what the judges were looking for that day. But 2 months ago, that's what they awarded as first. So you never know.
That sounds so frustrating.
Which it can be. It certainly can be. Some people are really energized by that though, because they're like, listen, I brought like my best possible package. So, you know, it is what it is at that day. However, that is yet another reason why when I'm talking to someone and they're like, you know, I copied this particular workout plan or this particular meal plan from my friend who's a IFBB pro or even an NPC, which is the amateur level. But even those amateurs, like they got a lot of muscle. I'm like, okay, understand the mentality of the person that you copied that from is somebody who is willing to train and eat and run their lifestyle a certain way for like months. And they will be on stage close to butt naked for 90 seconds. They're willing to literally like change their entire life for sometimes 6 months for 90 seconds.
That's wild.
So it's not just, you know, it's like thinking about the Olympics. You know, what was it? Usain Bolt, didn't he have that quote? Something like, you know, I train all year for 10 seconds. Something like that. And he's like, that's basically.
I mean, technically, it would be 30 seconds because I think he has to go through
whatever
heats, semis, and
but
then
anyways,
finals. But
whatever. So anyways, so that's part of my update. I went to the Arnold.
Fun.
And even at the Arnold, though, when Arnold Schwarzenegger himself was speaking, because we in the main like expo area where they have in the main like expo, and then, you know, like athletes and YouTubers and all the crazy stuff is going on there.
Yeah.
They do have sometimes like these talks where like on the stage, Arnold will come out. Jocko Willink was there. Rob Gronkowski, who was with the New England Patriots, was there. Some of the bigger names. Yeah, some of the bigger names in like the fitness space were there. And even Arnold a couple of times specifically talked about things that were going on politically and kind of where he stood. It was, I don't know. I'm trying to think like how to describe it from my point of view.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just, so for example, something that he said is, you know, he's like, I know there's a lot of disagreement and, you know, people who are happy with the president or who are not happy with the president. He's like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. We're still going to need to be healthy. And so it's just like, all right, dude. Like, okay. It's just kind of a weird statement. But if you know some of the backstory also with some of the comments that he has made in the past and then basically got like canceled by the super hardcore, like anti-vax, anti-mask community. Like there were sponsors, like major sponsors who pulled out of the Arnold because he basically said something along the lines of if somebody didn't want to wear a mask, they were basically unpatriotic because they didn't care about other people. And, you know, so all that stuff. So anyways, politics, it drips everywhere. But the trip itself was, it was a good trip. I talked a little bit about it on one of my recent podcast episodes where I was talking about coaches and influencers, just my perspective on what is a coach, what is an influencer, and then doing some comparison. And a big part of that was inspired by just the shift that's really happened at the Arnold, where at the expo itself, what it typically would have been is you would be going to the different like supplement booths or merchandise booths, and they would have one of the competitors that was there also as like a sponsored athlete or spokesperson.
Yeah.
And this time, what it primarily was for the few that were there, as far as like apparel and then some supplements, it was primarily people that were really, really popular fitness influencers on YouTube. Like Young LA,
the
pretty much.
YouTubers.
Yeah, like Young LA took over like 20% of the floor space. It was crazy. They had a I'm probably over exaggerating, but they had a massive footprint. And then half of the people that they had on there, I was asking one of my friends, like, yo, who is that? He's like, oh, it's the Trend Twins. I'm like, the Trend Twins? Okay. And Trend's like a PED. So they call themselves the Trend Twins. And they're apparently like super popular. I'm totally aging myself. I'm like Jim Uncle here. So yeah, but overall the trip itself was pretty cool. And we got to watch some of the amateur strongman stuff. So that was pretty cool. A lot of the stuff that in previous years you could watch for free now is, I was going to say, behind a paywall. Tickets you have to pay for, especially the pro strongman and strongwoman stuff. Like that stuff was so cool to watch a couple of years ago, but now it's a paid fee in addition to going to the expo, and we just decided not to go that route because there was some really cool amateur stuff we could watch, some weightlifting, all that stuff. So yeah, overall pretty good trip. So had a good time there. So that's my update.
Exciting.
Yeah.
How has it been getting back into your routine?
Back in the groove. Yeah. I've extended my like I'm on vacation vibes for a little long. You know what I'm talking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So it's been fine. It's nothing that I'm super like down about or anything like that or disappointed in myself. Like it's taken a little bit longer to kind of bring things back to what I'll call like the middle of the road, so to speak. And that's, I'm not really bummed about that. Like life continues to go on, and it doesn't take a whole lot because my middle of the road is not like super, super strict. Yeah. So I think that's also helpful too, but yeah, it's still probably going to be another couple days here before things really get back into somewhat of a normal rhythm. So yeah. So that's what's up. That's what's up. All right. Want to get into today's topic?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. All right. So topic that we are going to discuss today, a little context behind this. On my podcast, Help Me Understand, many times when I've got a guest on who is a coach, I will at some point ask them to help me understand something that they have shifted their perspective on, whether it's that they do personally or that they do in coaching now that maybe is different than what they used to do before. So something that they used to think, but now they kind of see it differently, a tactic that they used to use that now they're like, not so much. Like, for example, I had my friend Jillian on, and Jillian is a coach herself and then mentors other coaches. And she talked about in the past how like she was very much like macro tracking or die. Like that was how she coached people. And now she has an entire coaching business and modules. And the word is escaping me, just an entire program on being able to help coaches. It's called the Confident Coach, I believe, Confident Coach Mentorship, to help nutrition coaches break free from like, okay, well, if I don't have my client tracking macros, I probably can't help them make progress. So it's very much a shift, something she does differently because she used to believe, well, if that's how I got fit, that's how everybody's going to get fit. Yeah. So I thought that this could be a good catalyst for a conversation here about some things that we used to either think or do with either our own training or in coaching others, whatever, just kind of open forum here on things that we used to do that we maybe don't do anymore, or things that we think differently. So let's call it like training or nutrition perspective shifts here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, do you want to start off with one of yours?
Yeah.
My mic keeps
So
dipping here. There we go. All right.
my first one is something that I've fairly recently changed, actually. Um, and that is about zero drop shoes. And
Oh,
I would lump in minimalist shoes in there.
okay.
So, yeah. So, for runners out there, you've probably heard of like Born to Run and that book. I don't know if you've heard of it, JK. It's a book. Uh, was it Born to Run or was it Want to Runner? No, Born to Run. It's about like the Tarahumara people who run in, I can't remember where they are, so I'm not even going to try.
Okay.
They run in like bare feet basically, and
Okay.
then the author observed it and was like, they run in bare feet, so like this must be, and they're really good at running, so this must be what everyone needs to do. Like we should all, our clunky shoes are making us worse at running because we're not like feeling the ground, our feet are getting weaker, that kind of thing. So that's when like oh my god, what were those shoes called? The one with the little toes. Do you
The
know what I'm talking about?
Vibram 5 fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yep.
that's when those were really popular. That was around that same time. And then
God, I remember
Ultra,
those.
Ultra, the shoe company, Altra, not Ultra, the race
Okay.
distance. They came out and their whole shtick was zero drop shoes, so 0 millimeters. For anyone who's not familiar, the drop is the difference in heel height to your forefoot height. So zero drop is there's no difference, which we've talked about before because you want that in lifting shoes, so you have more stability um, and just like a firmer sole. But anyway, that's different. So those were all like kind of popular around the same time, and I hopped on the Ultra train kind of accidentally. My friend gave me a pair of their shoes, and then I was like, "Oh, this is amazing!" Partially because they were the only wide toe box
Ah,
shoes out there,
yes.
but then they also happened to be zero drop. So I went really towards the minimal side, and I've been re-entering into the cushy world, is what I'll call it. So I used to think minimal zero drop was like the way to go, better, but I don't think I think that anymore. It just feels nice to kind of run on a cloud sometimes and feel not
Yeah.
like my legs have to do all the work, if that makes sense.
Is there, from your perspective, is there a physiological difference or a, like, from a construction standpoint, is there supposed to be an advantage or disadvantage to wearing zero drop? Like, is it more muscle recruitment or something? Like, how does that?
I think I
That's my
can't
That's my
remember.
guess.
Yeah, I think like the big argument was around like actually using your foot muscles and not
Okay.
having
I mean, I
weak
could
foot
see that.
muscles.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that a lot that's come out over the years has been like zero drop doesn't, I think it was all about like less injuries, but it just kind of like shifts where you get
Oh.
injuries kind of thing. Because it
Okay.
puts more strain on your calves and Achilles. So for certain people, that might cause injuries.
Right.
Um, and like, I mean, you've heard me talk. I always have. It's always my feet,
Yeah.
my lower limbs are my issues. I don't think because of those shoes. I'm not blaming them. It's
Right.
kind of been like my whole life, high arches, that kind of thing. But yeah, and if you go like higher drop, usually that just shifts injuries up the chain, so to your like knees and hips versus the lower limbs. Um, yeah, and that kind of like goes in with like forefoot strike. It's harder to heel strike with zero drop shoes. So that was another
Okay.
argument. It was forcing more of a forefoot, which again just puts more strain in different places versus,
Right.
reducing injuries and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've gone back to kind of what it's funny. A lot of these are things I didn't think in college when I was running. And then as I grew into an adult, I started to think them. And now I'm back thinking kind of how I
Yeah.
thought in college. Because I just went with like whatever was comfortable and didn't think really anything about drop or cushion. It was just like, do these shoes feel good to run in for long periods of time?
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah, that
yeah.
makes sense. I could see if I was on the team that was trying to push those out, like if I was on the marketing team for Zero Drop or trying to get an investor, because I remember a guy going on Shark Tank. I wonder if he's affiliated or somehow linked to that. I think he was the guy who created Zero Shoes, like XERO, I think. Yeah. And I could see trying to really like pump the selling point of basically the cushiony shoes almost being a crutch.
Yes.
I could totally see that. And at the end of the day, I think it still comes down, it's always going to come down to the individual themselves. Because I especially think with something like running, that especially with like force absorption and things like that, I think with running, you're like, it's so much more individual. Because I think back to when I worked in like retail shoes, like just generally with that, and being able to, like when people would come in, and we sold at that point like I used to work at DSW, and I remember like at the time, and I was in the Chicago market, which is a pretty big market for running because it's so flat, like just Illinois in general, but just Chicago in general.
You got the marathon.
Yeah. Chicago. Yeah. It's a big running community. People like to run along Navy Pier and all that stuff. So we carried like so many ASICs, like so many. And I remember walking people through like the difference with heel toe, because sometimes you would say heel toe drop and they're like, what do you mean? I just need a pair of running shoes. And I was like, you might want to go downstairs to Dick's and get your gait measured first. Like have them actually look at like how you run before you pop back, before you just grab something. And because there were so many different ones. But that would have been prior to like really the massive push for the Vibram 5 fingers. They were popular, but they weren't like taken over at that point. So yeah. I know for lifting, I prefer minimalist, like flat shoes or Vans or stuff like that for lifting. I
would not wear cushy shoes for lifting.
Yeah, not.
Like, I don't know why you'd want to introduce that instability.
I have had a couple of clients who've worn Hokas when they were squatting, and I remember talking to one of them because I was like, I don't know about that, and I think maybe she was wearing the Cliftons, if I remember correctly, which I think maybe is a bit less of a heel toe drop than some of the others. But just generally with Hokas,
they're the stereotypical cloud shoe.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. But my daughter has like, she has a few. Yeah. Just because I know also she was saying like other stuff would just really bother her feet, but like Hokas, she is like in heaven. So I'm like, do your thing, enjoy. So
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. All right. So I'll jump in with one. So something that I used to think is that doing cardio will kill, or too much cardio would kill your gains.
Yes, a classic.
Yep. I definitely used to believe that if your priority was on getting jacked, that you wanted to really be careful about how much cardio you did, because doing too much cardio would eat away at your muscle.
Yeah.
And I really held on to this for a long time. And this one has recently actually been reintroduced into my YouTube algorithm for some reason.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like people still believing it?
No. Actually, okay. Influencers, on the influencer side.
Yeah.
Let me think. Let me try to think. Let me think here, because my YouTube algorithm will show me fitness videos from everybody from like 20-ish and beyond. So I'm getting like in the span of one day, I'll get like a get ready with me.
Okay.
From like a 20-something who just moved to like Texas.
Yeah.
And then I'll get here's how I lost 100 pounds as a 55-year-old. I have a very wild eye. And then I'll get like Dave Ramsey and some other random stuff. I watch a lot of random stuff, so then it recommends random stuff. Yeah. But anyways, one of the recent ones that stuck out to me that was along the lines of like too much cardio will kill your gains was from
Yeah.
somebody who was in their, let me say mid 50s. And she was like, yeah, it was something along the lines of, hey, here's mistakes that I made in my 40s trying to, that made it more difficult for me to build muscle. And so she was talking about doing too much cardio was really killing her gains. And so, okay, so if we just go with that part, like too much cardio kills your gains, I was thinking to myself like, I totally used to believe that too. But then I was thinking like back when I believed that, and this is prior to like YouTube really blowing up and whatnot. So this would have been what I started working out around 2009. So this is like 10 to 15 years ago, which is right around like the time that people thought that. So 10 to 15 years ago, there was no Instagram. There was no Facebook was like kind of just opening up to like people who weren't at universities. Cause previously, it was only universities. And Instagram, wasn't a thing. And TikTok, I don't use anyway. So
TikTok
it was all,
did not exist.
Yeah. It was all magazines and stuff like that. Like that was like
Vine,
the big thing.
maybe.
I didn't even get into Vine. I think maybe I saw 2 of them. I didn't really get into that.
I feel like it was short-lived. So.
Yeah. Maybe we should bring that back. But anyways, so I say that just to say there wasn't much context behind why is this person saying that cardio will kill your gains. And so I just picked up on the bro science of too much cardio will kill your gains. So I just latched onto that and never really either fact checked it or that was like, help me understand JK. Like, help me understand where that's coming from. And so as I started to first educate myself just as average layperson lifter, and then when I even gained more information as a coach and went through certification process, I began to understand that the detail is in the dose, always the dose. And so now referencing back to this most recent video that I saw from this woman who was definitely not like in her 20s. She, again, I think she said she was in her mid 50s. And so she was talking about mistakes I made in my 40s. Cause I was like, oh, that's an interesting title. She's like, mistakes I made in my 40s that kept me from building muscle. And so she's talking about how I was doing too much cardio and blah, blah, blah. And I definitely see that where people are leaning on cardio as the primary fat loss tool. Well, come to find out in this video, what she's talking about is she was training for a half marathon. So this whole time, like, we're going through this video this entire time, and then near like the very end, she starts talking. She starts integrating that the cardio that she was doing, and she mentioned, I was doing running and stuff like that, but she was like starting to talk about, as I was starting to like run more, then I noticed that I didn't have as much energy for my lifts and things like that. And the whole time I'm vibing. I'm like, yeah, you know what? She's right. Like that is something that's a mistake I definitely see people make. Like,
challenging.
Yeah. Because they're also at the same time focused on weight loss. And so they're eating less too. And so then she was making like some really good points. And I was like, yeah, this is a really good point. And she's communicating in a way that her audience would definitely understand. I'm not her target audience, but I was like, I see what you're saying. And then when I started to pick up on the half marathon thing, I was like, that would have been good for you to mention about 20 minutes ago. So
That's like, I don't know. When people say cardio, they don't usually mean training for a long race.
I know.
You know?
I know. I was like, yo, that would seem to be obvious. So to wrap up my first like perspective shift, I have come to now shift my belief that cardio, just the blanket statement of cardio kills your gains, is in fact a myth. And the fact would be that not having a proper mix of cardio with your hypertrophy training could potentially, I mean, either one or the other, is not having the right mix of both definitely will be at the detriment of one or the other, or possibly both. You never know. So yeah, it's really more about the implementation how are you doing it? How much are you doing? When are you doing it? And also really, regardless of how much you're doing or when you're doing it and things like that, at the foundation of it is how are you fueling yourself for either the cardio or the weightlifting or bodybuilding, and then how are you fueling your recovery too? Like those things all are going to matter also. So that is, I definitely used to be like team, like, hey, you got to be really careful about how much cardio you do. You got to be really careful. And then I have now backed off of that because I went like pretty hard extreme on that. Yeah. Because you want to have you want to have cardio in your program at the very minimal for just basic cardiovascular function, like
Heart health.
basically. Yeah. Okay. All right. So what's yours? What's next on yours?
My other one, so as I have it written, is super specific to me.
Okay.
But I will generalize it as well. So what I have written is running 6 days a week will lead to injury. So obviously that is more specific to me or a runner like me who has one rest day, runs all the other days, which I still think applies to almost every runner I see, not necessarily running 6 days a week, but a lot of people have this perception that if they run more days in the week than previously they have, they'll get injured. And usually I honestly see the opposite. Like if you run fewer days during the week, and this all depends on like goals and what you're trying to do, but the lower your frequency of running is, the more you are susceptible to injury, I think. Especially as we go up in distance, and especially if you do not supplement with cross training, just because you're not, I feel like we've talked about this before, but you're just like not getting that stimulus enough.
Yeah.
It's too infrequent.
Makes sense.
And running is a huge stress. So like there is definitely that risky period when you can do it with frequency of running during the week or volume. When you're building up, that is definitely a riskier period of time. But I did used to think that like there's no way I can run 6 days in a row and not get injured. Once I left college and moved to adulthood, like got back into running a lot. And yeah, I just feel like the more you can run, usually the better off you are if you have running goals. And just because you're running a certain number of days doesn't mean you're going to get injured. And then it all goes back to like, if you're running 6 days a week and your easy runs aren't easy, then yeah, you might be setting yourself up for, an injury. But so like if you train in a smart way, like increasing your frequency of running, as long as you still have the rest and recovery required for what you're doing and how your life looks, it is not a direct leader to injury.
Yeah, totally makes sense. The way that I just perceived that really speaks directly to, it depends on other factors also that support that. So that's why, that's one of the reasons, or one of the justifications, I guess, that I make with trying to get an understanding of what someone's lifestyle is like when it comes to answering questions about how much is too much, how much is enough, what should I do here, what should I do there, like things like that, because they're like the whole it depends. Well, these are the things that it depends on, because I even think about it in terms of like lifting weights. If you were to say, if somebody says I lift weights 5 to 6 days a week and then I run twice a week, I could easily say, well, you're doing too much right off the bat. Yeah. And there was a time where if somebody would tell me that, I'd be like, oh, well, clearly I see the problem. Like, you're clearly doing too much. Yeah. However, I would say now about 90% of the time that still ends up being true. However, now taking the time to ask some questions with, okay, so let's talk a little bit about how you feel. What's going on biofeedback wise. So then you start to, from a coaching standpoint, instead of first reacting with like, well, I clearly see your problem, you're doing too much. Yeah. It's okay, cool. Well, corporate speak. We'll put that in the parking lot. Train, you lift weights 5 to 6 days a week and you run twice a week. Okay, cool. So how's your sleep? And then you'll find that like sleep is kind of like it's okay for the most part. And then when you're like, okay, for the most part, what does that mean? Like, it's choppy. It's kind of all over the place. Then you find out that like they're like chronically sore like all the time. That was actually when we were putting this list together. I had actually had that as like one of the ones that didn't make the list, but I used to definitely think that soreness was the sign of like the best workout you could possibly do. Not that I made myself sore all the time. It's just sometimes if I would get sore, I'd be like, oh, that means that one, like I really went all out. Yeah. Until I understood like neurological stimulus and things like that. We're just like, maybe you just did things a little different, buddy. But yeah, I think being able to get an understanding of different things that are going into it, you're so right, makes a difference when it comes to, I don't think you can just blanket say, well, running 6 days a week, you're going to injure yourself. It's like, okay, well, what are the things? Maybe that person is doing things that actually support running 6 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost like, I forget what you were talking about recently. You know how we swung from grind culture to like lazy culture.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
We're
I feel like I've
seen
seen
overcorrection phase right now.
Yeah. It's like when I was coming up and running, it was run like no rest days.
Mm-hmm.
So like run all the time. And then I feel like we did swing the other way where it's like, you only need to run 3 days a week. And obviously I'm coming from like coaching people to finish certain distances or perform a certain way in a race. And I feel like you could run 3 days a week for half marathon and below.
Mm-hmm.
Half marathon is getting a little risky depending on what you want to do at the half marathon. But when I see people trying to marathon train on 3 days a week, it makes me really nervous. And I'm like, I feel like you are setting yourself up to have a higher risk of injury. And it's just so funny how we swung the opposite way. Before it was like, oh, people are training too much for races. And it's like, well, I mean, certain distances demand that. Like an ultra, you can get away. I have coached people who only ran 3 days. You can get away with it, but it's not pretty.
Yeah.
Like the more you can run, and I'm saying all of this with if you are not supplementing with cross training. And like we've talked about cross training, not just like, pedaling your legs and barely doing anything.
Right. Yeah.
Like if you're going to replace a run with cross training, we talked about this before, but like monitor your heart rate, make sure it's like actually getting up above like a walk. I would say, because like, yeah. But I see a lot of people who either won't cross train, say they don't have time to cross train, and they're like, I can only run 3 days a week. And I'm just like, I don't know, honestly, if you should try to run a marathon or ultra then. Like the two just don't really go together.
I don't know, man. This is one of those you could totally, pick apart. We're really good at stuff like that. Yeah, it's when I see, as usual, I see like a few different sides of it because something that's like still in my head. I watched this video recently. You remember, I know you watch her on YouTube. Justina Urkel, is that her name?
Oh yeah,
the one who does like the worst things I've seen on TikTok. Yeah. She recently had posted this video that I thought she framed it really well. It's something that I think if coaches watch it, they would totally nod along with it. And she essentially was like, listen, like if you want the result, you have to do that work. You can't do some of that work and get all of that result. And I'm just paraphrasing it. And I think about things like, in my world, I'm telling people you can absolutely make progress lifting 3 days a week. You don't need to lift 5 days per week. And in many of the cases where I'm having that conversation, it's because of the things that are being reported back that are going downhill to make 5 days per week work.
Yep.
So that's usually like where I'm coming from with it, which I know it's a bit different. And like in my head, many times I'm not like my psychographic is not the person who's like, how little can I do in order to get like the body composition changes that I want and in order to get stronger. So for me, it's just like the opposite,
Yeah.
you know, like I'm usually the one that's like, you want 5 days of training because you think it looks good to have 5 days of training. And I'm
Yeah.
telling you that based on so far what's been reported back, I mean, you could do 5 days if you want. It's going to be the same amount of volume that I would have had in a 4-day program. Like even right now in one of my group programs, I have a 3-day total body or a 4-day upper lower. Volume is equated.
Yeah.
Like literally, I think, yeah, literally every set and rep volume is equated for the programs. But for some people, that's the thing. Like I'm one of those people who thrives on frequency, but understanding how to first like know how you're wired. So I know that I thrive on frequency, and that frequency then has to be measured with the right amount of volume so that I actually get the right amount of intensity in the actual workout itself. Because I used to have like, let's say if it was like 8 exercises in 5 workouts per week, and I didn't need all that. But I can train 5 days per week just fine. And some of the days have like 4 exercises in them, and some have maybe 5, maybe 6. But for the most part, it's like 4 to 6 exercises, 5 days per week versus 8 exercises, 5 to 6 days per week. It's just not necessary.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. So last one, I got my last one. This one definitely, I used to think that it was
This was
specifically,
all the rage.
oh yeah, that eating small meals multiple times a day is the best way to get shredded because it's going to ramp up your metabolism. So this was straight like bro science for sure. And if I remember correctly, I think it was even 6 small meals was the
like
number that
5
I
or
heard.
6.
Okay. Yeah. I think that
Yeah.
when I was first, like in my first few years, so say like 2010-ish to about 2013-ish or so, like, yeah, I definitely thought it was like, okay, it made sense the way that I heard it. It totally made sense. Like you don't eat too much in one meal, but you just spread your calories across the entire day. Then because you're eating smaller meals, it gives your body time to digest it doesn't take as long to digest the food, and then your ramp up, like your metabolism is firing all day. You're on fire all day. And now, a couple of decades later here, or a decade later or so, it all comes down to the amount of total calories that you're eating in that particular day. And underneath that, before anybody like comes for me, I'm not just saying that it's all about like the quantity. Also, clearly, like the quality of your food does matter, and I totally agree with that. There have been a few studies. I even tried to pop on and look just to see like if there's anything like updated that's maybe a little bit different. But the majority of studies that have been done, whether they've been with trained or untrained, obese or non-obese, whatever, the majority of the studies that I've observed, for the most part, all come out to saying that changing your meal frequency has not equated to any sort of a difference when it came to weight loss or fat loss. Understanding as long as calories were equated. So that at the end of the day, it typically has still come down to whether you're eating 3 meals a day with a couple of snacks, or you're eating 5 to 6 meals spread throughout the day. It comes down to the individual, what feels comfortable for you, how it does or doesn't affect your sleep, how it does or doesn't affect your amount of energy that you have throughout the day. Because I can think like at that time, I would be like bringing like this big, massive like meal prep bag, which I still have. It's called a 6-pack bag.
Yeah.
And I would bring that bag and I'd have like my 6 meals or 5 meals at that point. Cause I'd be at work for like 9 hours. And so I'd like try and, make sure I was getting all my meals in. And then, but I'd get like really wrapped up at work. And so then I'm like behind by 2 meals. So I'm like, well, I wonder if I should combine these. Not an idea of like, yeah, no idea of like what calories are in there. I don't know. I just heard that's what you were supposed to do. It didn't. And at that point, I was definitely not like, I wasn't looking at calories or anything like that. It was more just like, all right, well, it seems like it makes sense. So, okay. Like this is before I really ever even focused on nutrition at all. Like that was my nutrition strategy.
Yeah.
It was just, I'm just going to do that. So, but you said you heard this one also, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember the context in which I heard it, but I do remember thinking every 2 to 3 hours I needed to eat something.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was around metabolism, or maybe it was something in one of the running magazines, because it was definitely around my running. Yeah. It was like, it would get so stressful if I didn't run in the morning. So I'd be like, oh my God, when I got to eat at a certain time, but then I also got to run. And then you can ask my mom. There'll be certain times where I'd be like, I need to eat now. And she'd be like, what?
Yeah, for real. So for those that are out there who maybe are still thinking that it's a hard and fast, like very black and white rule, that small meals is for sure the best way to get shredded. It may be the best way for you. It doesn't mean that it's the best way for everybody. At the end of the day, what I'm going to default to as a coach is what are your systems right now, lifestyle wise? Like, what does that look like? So, if I think of a day, like my Thursdays typically look something like I coach from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., take Mace to school right after that, may or may not have, occasionally I'll have a personal training client for like an hour. Then I've got like a couple hours in between that. And then I'm going into work at the store and I'm there until about 9:30. So the structure there, if you're telling me like, okay, well, 6 meals is definitely the way to go, where? Like, how's that happening? So, so I'm just like, and some people may be like, well, that's not like your average day. That's just like, okay, well, that's fine. I'm just trying to point out to you that that's not that wild of a day. Like there are definitely people who are out there who have, like, say they work out in the morning, then they rush home so they can help get kids ready for school and whatnot. They drop them off. Then maybe they go to work and whatnot, but then right after work, they go get the kid from after school care. Then they're up and then they've got to do some different things around the house. Then they pop back onto the work computer because they got to finish up a couple of emails. Then they want to have a little bit of downtime with their partner. That's their entire day. And you're telling them 6 meals a day, you got to get shredded, like, okay. Like clearly you don't work with humans, but I just remember that one. It ramps up your metabolism. I'm like, you're basically just eating snacks all day, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's not satiating usually. Depending on what your snacks are.
Full. Yeah.
Yeah, you're never full. You're always hungry. So you got to eat every 2 hours.
But people are like, I feel like all I do is eat, because that is all you do. Now, if you actually ate a full meal instead of just trying to live on snacks, that might help. So, yeah. Yep. There you go. All right. Let's see. That was my last one. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
No, we're right about an hour. It's perfect. So, thank you, everyone, for making it this far, if you made it this far.
Hey.
If you would like to, you can follow us on Instagram at Lifting Running Living Pod, or you can reach out liftingrunningLivingPod@gmail.com. If there's any topics you want us to cover, we would love to hear that. Or you can just leave us a 5-star review and rating.
We'll take that also.
Star is the rating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or comment on Spotify. That is a thing still.
I think that's all the places, all the things.
All the things. Yep.
Just like, comment, subscribe, share, do all the things. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, thank you for listening to episode 47 of Lifting, Running, and Living. We appreciate you. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.